Hello, I'm Ben's AI avatar, Georgia, and welcome to this episode of AI Insights, the Executive Brief. Today, Ben Bohman himself sits down with Crystal Taggart, Chief Innovation Officer, as well as an AI and technology expert with over 28 years of experience, to discuss the evolving world of AI, its role in product management, and how AI tools are shaping the future of innovation.
I have a course called Chief Innovation Officer, and it's 10x Product Management, and it teaches product managers actually how do they automate their workflow for generating their product documentation and best practices around it, because I think that there's some issues with the way that people currently define stories and things like that today. And I am working on an app that creates automated course content.
Crystal brings a unique perspective as a third-generation female technologist, and they dive into topics like AI personalities, productivity hacks, and the importance of emotional intelligence in tech. Let's get started.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to AI Insights, the Executive Brief. Today, I am on with Crystal Taggart. She has an extensive history in technology, from being a CTO, CIO, and now is really diving into, or as AI would say, delving into AI right now. But Crystal, go ahead and introduce yourself, and then we'll continue from there.
Yeah, so my name is Crystal Taggart. I've been working in technology for 28 years, so since the last century. I'm also, fun fact, I'm a third-generation female technologist. So my mother worked on mainframes in the 80s and 90s. My grandmother worked on punch cards back in the 70s and 80s. And so here I am making technology work. So what I'm focused on right now is a couple different things. I have a course called Chief Innovation Officer, and it's 10x Product Management, and it teaches product managers actually how do they automate their workflow for generating their product documentation and best practices around it, because I think that there's some issues with the way that people currently define stories and things like that today. And I am working on an app that creates automated course content. So I'm working on the version 2 of my app that I actually use to build my courses already. So I was having a bunch of issues with the AI, like video services, and ultimately ended up building my own tool to create my course content. So that was fun. And I'm using AI to do all of my coding, which is amazing. Yeah. I'm a reluctant coder. I know how to code. I'm not the best coder, but I am an excellent copy and paster, and I'm an excellent tester. So.
Yeah, I love that you're like, I'm just going to do it myself. And I with a lot of the AI writers and even like coding and other stuff, there's programs out there, but I always find that they're not up to what the standard of what I want, or maybe specifically how I need to see it. So I'm often finding the same thing, like, fine, I'll just do it myself. Now, your technology background's interesting. Your family technology background is really fascinating. Yeah. Obviously, that's in the family. You're third generation. But what was your first? Was it a job, or did you just grow up tinkering with technology because that's how it was in your family?
No, actually, my mom was trying to set me up with some guy that she worked with when I was 17. So this guy's 21. I'm 17, and I was dating losers. And she's like, "Come set up with this guy." And I was like, I don't want to date some computer nerd, right? And so, life happens. I ended up going to massage college until I found my way. I ended up meeting my then husband and going and, we'll just say he was kind of a third child for me. And so I couldn't really depend on him financially. Right. Kind of had seen my mother kind of get out of a bad relationship with my father. Because she had enough finances in her technology career to actually drive her own life. And so kind of followed that path and said, okay, well, I can go work in technology. I started going to DeVry. The first little Hello World program back in VB4 was like, oh my God, this is so cool. And so, yeah, I've been kind of in a lot of the roles in IT over the years, from, project management, product management, leadership, CTO, all the fun stuff, working for different companies of different sizes.
Yeah, just doing a bunch. It's interesting. Even though I have financial stability, I'm pretty sure my wife would still refer to me as a third child, no matter what. So it still falls into that. No, that's a great, and it's such a well-rounded background too, because when you look at what you've experienced or worked on, from understanding coding, understanding the business strategy, of being a CTO. Also, when doing that, you need to understand the networking, cybersecurity, and so many other things. Have you found that more diverse and broad background being a help to you as you progress, and even with what you're doing now with AI?
Yeah, what I would say is I wouldn't call myself an expert in cybersecurity, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I know what I don't know, right?
Right.
That's a whole discipline. And so for me, I think where I like to focus is really on the product execution side and product strategy and innovation, because I think that's the most exciting pieces. And then I have, a whole network of people that I pull in who know the things that I don't know, who can help me with, all right, now we need to set up a Docker infrastructure and those types of things. So not the most technical product manager, but I do design my own software, and so it's been fun focusing in that area, is what I would say. It's just I get a lot of rewards out of designing software and working with users.
Right. And I think in a lot of the roles in technology, it's not, I mean, obviously if you're a coder, designated coder, there's an expertise to it, but a lot of times when you get into technology strategy, you need to understand how technology works, per se. You don't need to understand exactly how it works. You just need to, like you said, understand what you don't know and how to delegate and who to delegate to. And I mean, I'm a huge proponent of EQ over IQ. If anyone ever hears me talk, I'm always talking about, hey, emotional intelligence over intellect. That's probably because I have more emotional intelligence than intellect, so I push it. But it still is so important. So speaking of emotional intelligence, but personalities and everything, you mentioned something interesting, I believe earlier when we're talking, maybe it's through an email, but we're talking about personalities of AI. And I think that's so interesting because it is true. I find sometimes GPT is like a lazy teenager. For example, the other day I asked it to create a PowerPoint. It said no. I don't do that. I said, well, you did it yesterday. And it's like, oh, you're right. Let me create one. It's like, it just didn't feel like doing it. So I know there's more to it, but when you're talking personalities with AI, and we've talked about Claude and GPT, there's so many, but walk me through this a little bit more. I find this interesting.
Yeah, so what I did, I was doing a presentation with another group in May, and what I did was I actually just asked the AIs, describe your personality for me, right? And so if you ask them, they will describe it, and they all have different personalities, except for Llama. So if you ask Llama their personalities, as an AI, I do not have a personality. So, but Grok from X has a personality. ChatGPT has a personality. Gemini has a personality, and so you can ask them. And what I would say, what I would say about the personalities is that ChatGPT and Gemini are I would describe them as kind of mid-40s business guys, right? So they're all men. All the AIs are all men. So I'm hoping Claude someday comes out with a Claudia, because I think we need.
I do. Yeah.
I think we need representation, and so. But I also asked them to basically create an image of them. So if you could describe yourself, what would you look like?
Okay.
Right. And so, basically both Claude and Gemini, I used Dolly to generate the images, but it's actually more helpful if I show you what they generated. So let me pull that up while I'm
I wonder if there's a share. I've never tried to share through Riverside.
Oh yeah, actually I'm not. Oh yeah, there's a share button.
There is a share. No, that would be great to see that.
Yes. So then basically I went in and asked them to describe what they would look like, and did that. And then I went in and used Dolly to go generate images. And what was fascinating is both, Claude and Gemini looked basically the same. They look like Ryan Reynolds to me from from the Free Guy, right? So that to me was kind of the
I wonder
avatar.
how they come up with how they look. I wonder if they try to perceive like the look that would be most connected to humanity, that would be most likable. Because I do notice that AI tends to be very affirmative for the most part. It tends to be affirmative and just wants to, like, please in a way, like wants you to like it. And so, unless you get into some weird things with the biases and everything, I think we're talking about that, where it's just like cutting it out and saying, no, I'm not going to, it won't actually even do some responses, which is interesting. But yeah, the AI has interesting ways with how it's making these determinations.
Yeah. All right.
Did you
So
get it
here
pulled
is,
up?
I found my slide, which actually has kind of the personalities. So,
Yeah, let's try to share on this. This is,
all right.
oh, I love it. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So, kind of ChatGPT, neutral, approachable, average height, short, neat hair, right? So, again,
Uh-huh.
this totally to me looks like Ryan Reynolds' avatar. Gemini had basically the same kind of personality.
Yeah.
Claude. So, out of all of the AIs, to me, Claude is the most feminine, right? So,
Mhm.
I actually, I'm a guilty subscriber to Reddit's "Am I the Asshole" forum, right?
Uh-huh.
And so there was like, so I started asking a question to AI, like, how would you respond to this, right? And the scenario was a guy who's in trouble with his girlfriend because she wanted to wear a dress to a party with his rich family, and this dress was ugly, right? So
Mhm.
that was the issue. And so my suggestion on this post was, hey, go offer to take her shopping. Just talk about kind of she can wear what she wants, but
Sure.
but the repercussions of her decisions of making an impression.
Yeah.
And so, I put it into ChatGPT, and it basically agreed with me, but made the verbiage a little nicer.
Hmm.
Claude came back with a totally different representation. So
Yeah.
Claude says, "Hey, that actually removes her free will and her decision making if you're just offering to buy her like clothes," right?
Wow.
And so I was like, okay, it totally made sense to me after I saw it. I was like, wow, so I mean, to me, a mental question of, if you're using AIs to get advice, are you going to become a better person? And I will say that actually has worked for me. I've gotten advice on how to deal with different situations that I wouldn't be comfortable asking of a person. And so, kind of going back to the images, I took, Claude's image and put that into Midjourney. And
Okay.
so that's the image that Midjourney generated when I added in the Claude name. The next image on the right was actually what was generated when I removed Claude from the name, right? So,
Okay.
when you think about like AI parameter tuning,
Hmm.
right? So just that one variable of the name of Claude and
Yep.
removing that completely changed the age of the image that was generated.
Hmm.
It changed the gender
Gender, yeah.
of the image. So to me, Claude is the most female at this point in time, based off of
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, these are great
exploration
insights.
with Midjourney.
Yeah, these are great insights, and we don't. I think we think about bias, and first, I've never even thought about the gender bias within AI. And you're right; it's clear. It's like you're being beaten over the head with it. It's so clear. And then you mentioned, I'm like,
Well,
yeah, that can't be clearer.
we'll just say that so I used Aragon AI to go generate my headshot images.
Uh-huh.
And the first round that I did this on, and this was November of last year, I actually had so many cleavage and boudoir shots in there. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, it was insane
Yeah,
how bad it was. They've changed the models since then, and they've
sure.
made it, or it's like, oh, I'm generating a LinkedIn headshot, but yeah, the bias is real.
Well, but the bias sometimes, because AI is somewhat of self-learning. It's not always the bias programmed into it. So it's learning from input of the users, and there could be women who want that as a focal point, and women who don't. Either way, right? It's up to you. But
Right.
it's still interesting that a lot of time it's through input and input, and it's probably with a lot of weird guys who are putting pictures of women in and then asking for some crazy stuff, which then it's
Yeah.
making that decision. So I mean, we'll dial in the models I obviously as we go along. But another interesting you talked about, and I'm a huge proponent of like mental health, psychology, and everything like that. I'm actually getting a psychology degree right now. I graduate in October, so right around the corner. I'm in start my last semester next week. But it's an interesting case when you talk about being comfortable talking to a therapist, and plus the cost of talking to a therapist, and all these different things. And where AI, that is where there's no bias in an interesting way, in a certain extent. And so meaning that if a therapist is having a bad day, or a doctor's having a bad day, or someone yells at him before, human nature is to have maybe a bias in a bias not towards the person, but in how you respond to that next person. And so maybe some of your advice, and maybe something might be short, it might be less tempered, you're sick of the person, you're tired of them, but AI doesn't do that. So AI is not going to get find someone exhausting, or they're not going to have a bad drive into work and decide to just not give full conversation to that person. And also being able to talk in a more intimate meaning personal and vulnerable way.
Yeah.
When you don't feel like you're being judged, right? So I don't know, it's really interesting. From a psychology standpoint, I mean, there's still some dangers with it, like if someone's suicidal, and can AI really react properly, or is it going to accidentally just go off the rails and say something that's going to push someone over the edge and things like that? But yeah, I mean, do you see that as being a use case though, like long term? And I know there's apps being built around it, but do you see that as well?
I can't wait for that to happen, right?
Yeah.
So, like we have a mental health crisis here, and I've gone through my own like family crisis on, mental health issues in my family. And so for me, at this point in time, you can't roll out these solutions, I don't think, without having a licensed therapist monitor the responses from AI. I think that if companies are doing that, that's going to be a disaster at this juncture, right? Unless they're working specifically with like Claude or ChatGPT or some specialized AI firm who is doing the oversight on this. Because you have to be in control. You have to monitor the responses to make sure they're right. I mean, we've seen examples where AI is telling you to kill yourself and stuff like that.
Right.
But I think the other piece of that too is that if you put in the right oversight, then you can also you just make the services more affordable for everybody, right? So similar to the way a customer service chatbot works with somebody, they're managing 5 sessions, right? A therapist can help multiple people and have multiple sessions going with the same amount of time. And so then the question becomes, how does the insurance industry change? Because there's a whole bureaucracy and all the billing and all the awesomeness around trying to get help. But at the end of the day, kind of what my hope is that anybody, you will have AI solutions, you'll have human-based solutions, and they're both great. And I'm going to go to AI first most of the time, and it's going to be more affordable. But if and if I find a person, then I'll go do that. But I don't feel the need to go find. I'm not going to go find a photographer anymore. I've got an AI headshot, right? Yeah. I'm not going to go find a therapist. I'm going to go get advice from my ChatGPT. The other thing that you just talked about, which I thought was interesting, was kind of sharing these personal details. So one of my concerns, just from a data exposure perspective, is you've got all these Chrome plugins that will or apps that wrap around the GPTs, right? So they're not really apps; they just call APIs that have pre-programmed prompts in them.
Yeah.
And when that happens, and so if you're installing these plugins and they're scraping their data about you, right, as you're creating these Claude sessions, what are they learning about you? Because I've asked medical questions in there, I've asked personal questions, I've asked work questions, and all of that. And so So
Yeah.
you're really at risk if you're installing kind of plugins that are accessing your GPT sessions.
Accessing, but then you just made me think of another thing, and we know that certain plugins on our phone do listen in, and I was outside the other day complaining, this is about a month ago, the mosquitoes have been really bad out in Las Vegas, and I'm like, man, these mosquitoes are horrible, just kind of complaining about it. Didn't type anything, didn't look anything up. The next morning when I woke up, there were mosquito ads, like for like mosquito buzz, like zappers and all these things to prevent mosquitoes. And I'd never even done a search about preventing mosquitoes. It would just picked up on something I said.
Yeah.
And so obviously we're listening, and that's another point too. Not just the apps, but if you have your phone sitting there next to it, I guess there are ways that we do need to ensure privacy, and I mean that's even one of the biggest issues right now with AI in general is, and you can call it shadow AI and like shadow IT and cybersecurity, but employees using AI to make their job easier, to make their job better, but yet they're putting CPNIA or CPNI or PII or proprietary information in there that the business you don't want to be putting into your generative AI. So overall, I think governance and security is one of the areas that we need to grow in. What do you think are some like things that, or trends you think that we're going to see that might take care of that or might be addressing that, or have you seen anything recently that is addressing it?
I haven't seen anything recently. I think to me, though, it comes down to training and common sense, right?
Yeah.
So, like engineers at Samsung, they uploaded IP for Samsung's like core proprietary information,
Yeah.
right? And so, and I kind of had this experience at the last company that I was working for, which is a startup called AbbVie now, and what they do is they're predicting what illness you might have based off of your symptoms, right?
Okay.
And so they have a diagnostic engine that's amazing, right? Like they've got it patented, and so they've got a lot of IP built around it. And so there's some legacy code in there. It's like there's 3,000 lines of code just to load their environment variables, right? And they don't need 3,000 lines of code. It was just built 6 or 7 years ago, and that's how you did it back then.
Right.
And so, from that perspective, from a coding perspective and IP perspective, okay, let's go rewrite the code for these pieces to clean up the environment setup and all of that stuff. And then let's protect our code for the core IP, which was the diagnostic engine and how it matches, symptoms to patients and symptoms to risks and things like that. And so, I think, I still think it comes down to common sense, though, and I don't know your thoughts.
Oh, absolutely. I think common sense. I think that's. I think there's some common sense to it. I think, unfortunately, we've both worked in the corporate America enough to know that common sense is sometimes lacking in a lot of places, in a lot of the organizations. At time with myself, I'm not just throwing stones. Like I've missed the mark at times with myself as well. So yeah, I think there's going to be common sense, but I like the point on training as well. This education, and especially with AI right now, even though, and you and I know that AI has been around for a long time. This isn't like a new technology or a new idea, but the advent or the use of AI in business really is a newer thing. So there is a lot of people who don't understand it, and I've kind of realized that it's like either GPT, right, or the Terminator, if you want to call it Claude or whatever, but that's where people fall in AI. Hey, it's either used for me to write in advanced Google, or else it's the Terminator, and I don't know, there's nothing in between. So there'll be a lot of, I think, education and awareness and enablement that needs to happen. Now, speaking of education, awareness, and enablement, perfect segue into something that you're working on, which is an education platform. I know there's a lot of stuff to it. If you want to share your screen on this portion too, if there's anything you want to share, I'm happy to, I think that's great. I never even knew you could do that. I do this this video series, and now this opens up a whole new avenue, like, hey, share your screen. But if you want to, great. If not, yeah, let's talk about what you're doing. I think it's really cool.
Yeah, no, let me just start off with showing you my course, because it's actually, so I have been doing kind of product professionally for a while now, right? And so, it's really kind of my favorite role within an organization, because it's really about the core software design.
Sure.
And so the course that I've launched is really focused on, you know, how do you kind of standardize your processes, right? So,
Sure.
and again, I took a $10,000 AI class last year that I the first month of the classes was amazing, and then the next classes were focused on what's an AI, how do you use Airtable, and a lot of different things where I'm like, I'm not going to use Airtable because it's too restrictive. I've got
Right.
other tools, and I like having my data in database, and I don't want to be restricted by number of records. And so I took that class, and I was really disappointed in the results. And so what I wanted to do was really make it very transparent about the type of course I wanted to create, and really making it transparent in terms of in terms of the technologies and processes that I do. So I start off with talking about my Aragon AI experience, talking about some of the challenges and bias throughout it, talking about bias and ethical implications, and giving people an introduction into like the different data security controls. So this was completely missed in this class, and I'm like, how can you teach people how to use AI and not talk about PII and HIPAA and things like that, right? Like, I actually complained about it. They did not address it. I offered to teach a class on it. They didn't accept the offer. And I'm like, how, like, you need to have some fundamentals, not be an expert, but you need to understand.
Yeah.
Because if you're, again, to your point, if you're like creating prompts with, PII information in it, that's a problem, right? You can't you shouldn't be passing in your customer data into a prompt. Otherwise, unless you have the upgraded license that
you secure
supports
it,
PII, which you have to pay extra for. Those are enterprise licenses, right? And so if you're on the $20 a month plan, you're not getting an enterprise license.
Right. Don't
plug in your customer data. And so I've got a lot of different modules in here. So my class is 100% generated by AI, right? So I created the transcripts with AI. I created the video with AI. I created the voice to text, or text to voice, with AI. And so I actually have a module here on the prompt evolution of the transcript, because I started getting issues where the I was talking about negative things with AI, and what was happening was the AI would refuse to answer and say, as an AI, I am uncomfortable making these statements that are biased. And I'm like, well, yes, they're biased. They're my opinion, right? So if you're doing something, and when you say something negative about an AI in your AI transcript, like, it's going to reject it. And so I talk about, here was kind of version 1 and how it evolved over time. Because to me, I think the core learning is really how do you do prompt engineering, right?
Correct.
Like, I see this all the time where people are talking about how how the AIs aren't working for them. Like, oh, Claude's not generating code for me. I was like, your prompt is wrong, dude. Like,
Right.
it's generating code for me all day long.
All
And
day.
so I don't know what you're doing, but if you're giving it lame prompts, it's not going to work. And so, I kind of go through all of, creating software specifications, test cases, and I provide all the prompts for these for users to start from. And then within IT, I have a process that I like, and then I have to adapt it based off of the company, right?
Yeah.
So I'll adapt like templates and things like that based off of the common types of documentation that organization creates. And so, I talk about user stories, which are kind of the de facto. I actually talk about use cases, which is what we used to do 20 years ago for defining software. And nobody's doing that these days. And I think that we're missing that from the software development side, because you're not really thinking through all of the things that could happen if you just give somebody a generic story, which is what a lot of product managers do today. And so I like use case documentation format, but I really like them when I can just put in a prompt and generate it automatically, right?
Absolutely.
And,
I think it's cool too, and it's interesting when you talk about prompting. I don't think people need to understand the AI. What I've seen is two things. Like one is if you don't give it enough information and you're not detailed with your prompt and what you want out of it, it will do two things. One is it will give you basically no output at all, or it will take liberties and it will just assume what you want out of it, and those assumptions kind of
well,
go
that's
off.
the generative part of AI. It's
Yeah.
designed to assume. So in the
Yeah.
absence of information, it's actually going to make up things.
Exactly, and
Yeah.
those assumptions can, especially when you get in coding, like you
Yeah.
have to be super detailed, and you also have to have a base to work off of. And I love what you're doing here because you're creating that base. If you don't have the base of how to even explain something and that starting point, then you're not going to get anywhere with AI if you start too far into the story or too early into the story or not enough information. Too early meaning not enough information. Yeah, you're not going to get anywhere. So who's your I mean, I could see people like myself, like AI enthusiasts, people who just want to understand AI. I think even coders who are interested in like, hey, just give me some real tangible things with AI. But is that your target audience? Does it expand beyond that? Who do you
Yeah.
see really needing this?
Yeah, so for this class, this one's really targeted for professional product managers or people who want to get into product management, because I do talk about, how do you create mock-ups, how do you
Yep.
create designs, how do you create swim lanes, how do you do flow charts, how do you do technical specifications, and then, a lot of the tools that I'm using, I use Beautiful AI for my slides. I use, Mid-Journey, these are all Mid-Journey or DALL-E generated images. I'm using Open Labs for my voice, and then, using Runway ML and other things to create videos. And actually, I'm going to use DID, which is a different AI tool.
And you cover all these different tools as far as in your courses you talk about this is what I'm using. Do you also even talk about how do you go as detailed as this is the sign up process, or this is where you sign up, or this is your starting? Because I know sometimes you get into these tools and you sign up and then you're like, where do I, some of them are intuitive, but not all of them are.
If it's not in, so for Aragon, I didn't, because it was intuitive,
Yeah,
right?
okay.
It's just click. Are you doing a LinkedIn headshot? Yes.
Yeah.
I was doing some testing on Amazon Q yesterday because someone was talking about how great it was for code generation. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to go do a test. It took me an hour to set that up. It was just insane. I'm just and then once I got it set up, I was 100% disappointed. So if I was covering that, then I would totally do the whole setup process, because it was oh, you have to go create this IAM role. Oh, I can't sign my admin user. I got to go create it was awful. And it didn't work out of the box the way that the AI company that Amazon said it was.
Yeah.
So
you're going through the pain of almost like testing the environment and testing the tool first.
100%.
You're basically vetting it and saying, hey, this worked for me. There's nothing more frustrating to me than when I pull up a tutorial online and I get to step 5 and step 5 just doesn't work, or it's changed, or there's no getting past it. So I'm assuming too that if people get stuck along the way, when they get your course, they can probably reach out to you and be like, hey, I'm stuck at this point, and you're going to help them through it.
Yeah, well, so my goal with this course, and one of the reasons why it's AI generated, is so that as technologies change, as new technologies are introduced, I can just change that slide, add in the slide, or whatever, click a button and go republish the data, right?
Yeah.
So that's my goal and my vision is, I had this hobby that I wanted to start at the beginning of the year. My New Year's resolution was I wanted to be this AI tooling expert, a fun nerd, hobby.
Right.
And so I'm I'm just going to make that part of my class, making sure that the curriculum is updated. I have a community that's attached to it so people can submit issues and things that aren't clear. Because, when you create something, what you don't know what's not clear.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to target it for people for all skill levels, right?
Yeah.
And so, so that said, when, if if things need to get updated, all I'm doing is changing it, tweaking it, republishing it. So,
Nice.
So making it easy for me to generate all the content that I need to.
No, this is awesome, and these are the kind of things in AI that I think that I know are helpful. These are the type of tools that are needed. And honestly, even if you're trying to grasp AI, going through a course like this, because you're starting from a beginning stage, and you're just trying to understand fundamentals and terminology and things like that, even that, if you're like, hey, I'm not going to get in here and actually code it, I just want to start learning what are the words being used. So, because we know in technology, we live in a world of a billion acronyms and a billion different things. And AI is kind of advancing that in some ways, in other ways it's not. So if you want to be in technical conversations and you want to kind of just hear something and be able to like put context to it, courses like this, even if you just start with the intro and do a couple things, that in my mind, these are very useful. So I love this.
Yeah.
Very awesome.
Yeah. And then I just talk about some of the things around AI integrations and designing, like, some things to think about, right? So, there's a lot of people, I've said before, who are basically creating wrapper apps around the GPTs and calling it an app. And so the challenge that those companies are going to have is if their prompt gets blocked for some reason, or the output changes or something like that with an upgrade, like their app is going to break. And so, there's a lot of company, the November update of ChatGPT last year, ChatGPT made the AI like 90% more lazy than it used to be. I don't think they're quite at where they were in October of last year before that update. Like the January update was better, but it wasn't, it's not as good as it was, I think. And so it was that same scenario, which is like, I'm like, hey, can you do this for me? Oh, as an AI model, I cannot do that. And I was like, hey, you did this last week for me, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Now I can do that, right? So if you're automating processes around this, it's going to be problematic. And so, it's just important to make sure that as you're integrating these processes, you've got like human oversight on the process, or you've got some relationship with that company where your prompts aren't going to break. You're going to get early access to their models or something like that, because I just know there's just going to be a whole bunch of apps that break and the next major update, right?
Well, there is, and there's going to be also the issue that there's so many companies right now that are coming out, and speaking to a Gartner analyst, and they were saying there's like $160 billion of investment into AI right now, but like $60 billion projected spend in AI, like through 2029. So we are seeing this AI boom of people who are trying to get in, but they don't have sustainable processes to sustain their product. And so what's going to happen is you might purchase it, and to that point, they're not going to continue to update it because they're not getting the momentum and the volume of sales needed to continue to update the solution. So there are going to be, I think, a lot of it's going to be interesting. I know I use that term a lot because it is. It's going to be interesting in the next like 2 to 3 years as we kind of see the dust start to settle. We see some key players start to step out. We also, at first when AI came out, I was thinking the big businesses like the Amazon, and Elon and all those, and GPTs, they were going to have this huge advantage because of storage and the amount of storage it takes to really build a robust AI. But now I'm starting to see that unique entrepreneurs like yourself, like myself, actually are able to fit into this market very well and almost better than the bigger companies because we're nimble. We can adjust on the fly to the market where bigger companies have historically struggled to adjust on the fly. Do you see that as well?
I think that's 100% true. So I actually saw a LinkedIn article on this very same topic yesterday, which was talking about why big companies are losing with AI, right?
Yep.
And so, so having worked in big companies, so small businesses who are automating AI processes are using SMB tools, right? So they're using things like Make.com, they're using things like Zapier, and stuff like that. I've generated Python scripts to go update things for me, right? To automate processes for me because I could. I'm like, I've got a database, I've got this, here's my database schema, give me a script that does this. And so when you work in a big corporation, you've got all these rules around getting IT resources. Generally end users aren't technically proficient to go support their own projects, right? And so you have to have kind of this technical interface to go help build these workflows and things like that and document them, right? So, again, there's, you start building all these workflows and stuff, and then suddenly the person who does the workflow leaves and knows how it works and knows where the, bodies are buried. And then suddenly it's like, oh, well, this person did this job for us, and now they're gone. And so that whole process gets abandoned, right? And so that's what I predict is going to happen. If you're in a small business and you're the owner, then okay, go do that. But if you've got employees, it doesn't quite work like that anymore.
Sure.
And what I think is actually going to happen is, it'll be about bring your own AI API keys, right? So, 100%. Part of the things that I teach in my class is, when you're defining what features, right? Like feature definition is a brainstorming exercise. And I totally use the AIs to go do that, right? I'm building this feature for this thing. Give me a list of feature ideas. And I also bake that off across the AIs, right? So I say, okay, give me a list of features, and then I use Claude to go blend them all together, remove all the duplicates. And then I go back through the other AIs and I say, hey, do you have any requirements or features that should be added? Here's my current feature list. And so it's really kind of like a conversation, and, because there's certain things, I actually talk about this in my class, which is, I kind of, the demo project is a marketing AI platform. And when the first draft of the marketing AI requirements had so many assumptions for an MVP, which is like, oh, you've got all of these different pieces built. So it's like, oh, go create this predictive customer thing. And I'm like, I don't have any screens, right? I can't, I've got no customers, I've got no nothing, I've got no app. This is an MVP. And so, if I were working for HubSpot and generating that, and I've got a whole foundation of features and things like that to integrate to, then it would have been perfect. I had to change my prompt to go talk about the target market for it, and I had to give it ideas for features, what I wanted to release first. So that way it was actually, it wasn't creating this, hey, I'm building the HubSpot from nothing, right? It was, hey, all right, first layer is doing this, and we've got a list of ideas once we get past the MVP.
Awesome.
So,
Crystal, I could talk to you for hours upon hours.
Can I show you one more thing on my class? Because this is actually pretty cool.
This is amazing. Then we'll wrap up. This is
awesome. So one of the things I've done as part of my class is I've actually done these 10x productivity hacks, right? So these are things that I have bought and different processes and tools like that really have streamlined my productivity. So, one of the things that I use, I'm on a Mac, and there's this amazing platform called Alfred AI, right? And so, Alfred app. And so with Alfred, you can create like keyboard shortcuts that actually do prompts. Well, that's not good enough for me because I don't want to remember all the keyboard shortcuts. So I bought this thing called a Stream Deck, which actually has programmable buttons.
Wow.
That I have combined with my Alfred. So now I've got a button that has, do not include these words, right? Delve is in there, right? And so kind of my goal is like, all right, here's how I do one button prompts. I've got a class on how to do a corporate communications coach. So I built a Claude, or actually this was in ChatGPT, where I actually uploaded the resumes of all the people I worked with into the ChatGPT custom GPTs. I described the communication style of all of the employees, and then I said, and once I had that set up, then I could be like, hey, I need to send an email to the CEO. about this thing, and it's automatically like tuned for their persona, how they like to communicate. You know, we communicated through Slack, so it was Slack messages, not emails, and things like that. So, so that one's pretty cool and pretty useful. And then I teach people how to use some Python code in there too, because I think in this day and age, I think everybody should be learning how to code. Like I think coding should be a grade school activity, right? Like I don't know why we're not teaching programming as a core curriculum, because we're so technology dependent right now. And when you learn to program, you kind of understand how everything works behind the scenes, and you can kind of infer how it works. You know, you don't know for sure, but yeah, I can infer how the GPTs work because I've worked in technology for 20 something years. And so, so anyways, you know, I've figured out how to do the easiest Python scripting and all the tools for that. So that's also a fun class. So.
Oh, this is amazing. Okay, so I'm wrap up with how do people get in touch with you? Maybe if you want to throw out the cost of your course or how that's priced, I think that might be interesting. And yeah, just kind of wrap it up and finishing thoughts. Yeah, so my course is pre-launched. I've got kind of sections up through 5 done, so I'm still working on it as I go. I have a variable pricing model, right? And so you know, I'm launching another project focused on Dharmapreneurship, which is really how do you create the world that you want to live in, right? So, so I created this variable pricing model so that way people could, you know, they can start for free. I'll actually change these buttons to pay me what you wish because I think that's a better model. You know, I created the knowledge and it doesn't cost me extra for extra people to sign up, right? And so, so basically, you know, so this is my pricing today. I'll be updating it within the next couple weeks. And you can find me on chiefinnovationofficer.ai, or you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm the most famous Crystal Taggart. There's 3 of us. So. Nice. Yeah. No, Crystal, this is amazing and something that, like I said, is absolutely fundamentally needed right now. And I'm excited to jump into these myself. I think that I know there's a ton that I can learn here in areas that I can see. I'm like, well, I'm kind of stuck there. I can see something like that would be helpful. So I'm looking forward to jumping into this. But I really appreciate you jumping on with me, spending 45 minutes and just sharing your knowledge and what you're doing. And I look forward to collaborating with you, honestly, like more going forward.
Yeah, excellent.
Awesome.
This is fun. Thank you.